we destroyed them because nothing was untouched. So if we didn't make them, we destroyed them.
Right.
Which was actually kind of sad, like seeing things. It would be like this amazing dress, and you'd be like, take it downstairs to I don't want to see it anymore. Right. It has to be destroyed.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume podcast. I am your host, Spencer Williams, and thank you so much for joining me for another bonus episode. What's going on, costume nerds? I am so excited to be here to talk with you all today because we have a extra special episode. And I just got to warn you, if you've ever found this podcast hard to listen to because you find me to be such a insufferable nerd, well, this is going to be a hard episode for you then, because I'm about to go full nerd, dig deep into the pits of my nerddom, because I am a huge Fallout fan. I have been playing these games for as long as I can remember. Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, playing any new editions of the games. The games have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And I was so excited to hear about this series being adapted. But then I was also, of course, very hesitant because I think it's fair to say that most video game adaptations don't do very well. But I'm so happy to say that this series on Prime Video is just absolutely perfect. I love every second of it. I love the characters, the world building, the campiness of it, the humor, the horror, the blood, the gore. I mean, it's everything about it is perfect, and especially the costumes. I'm so excited to get into the Prime Video series Fallout on the Art of Costume podcast. But before we get into it, let me give you a little summary to catch you up. Fallout is the story of haves and have-nots in a world in which there's almost nothing left to have. 200 years after the apocalypse, the gentle denizens of luxury Fallout shelters are forced to return to the irradiated hellscape their ancestors left behind, and are shocked to discover an incredibly complex, gleefully weird, and highly violent universe waiting for them. Diving behind the costumes, we have creator Graham Wagner and Geneva Robertson Duart. And it was executive produced by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, whom I am very big fans of. And of course, we have to get into the costumes designed by costume designer Amy Westcott. You know her from a ton of notable works, such as The Wrestler, for which she received her first CDGA nomination, Entourage, for which she received 3 CDGA nominations, Black Swan, for which she received a BAFTA nomination and a CDGA win, After Earth, The Many Saints of Newark, and The Menu. And I was so excited to talk to Amy about the Fallout series. I mean, honestly, I was kind of nervous because I'm about to hit this costume designer with so many questions. She's never going to want to talk to me again or get off the call and be like, woof. But we had an incredible time, a great conversation. The costumes really are just so incredible because the Fallout universe is very dirty, falling apart, resourceful, using random materials. So hearing Amy's process and bringing a lot of those elements to the show was just so fascinating. Of course, we talk about the power armor and the Ghoul played by Walton Goggins. There's a lot to talk about. If you enjoy this conversation, please, please, please leave us a 5-star text review on Apple Podcast and rate us on Spotify. It really, really does help. I hope you all enjoy. After this break, we'll be joined by costume designer Amy Westcott. I am beyond excited to welcome today's costume designer, the one and only Amy Westcott. Hi, Amy. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm afraid to say that not only am I a journalist in costume design in film and television, but I'm also a huge gamer whose favorite game happens to be Fallout. So I've been waiting to talk to you for 3 years now.
That's amazing.
Well, let's get into it. So to start, I would love to know more about your familiarity with the world of Fallout. Did you know what you were getting yourself into? Maybe a kind of an idea?
Yeah, I guess it was kind of an idea, but I had no idea of the sort of depth and intricacies and rules and things like that. I had an idea of what it looked like as the game,
Right.
but I also was sort of not interested in following like an exact replica sort of thing where that's not that creative to do. So it was trying to sort of figure out if we were going to stay in the game world or it was going to be based on the game, and then starting our own story. So that was the latter, which was great for me.
And what was your reaction getting into Fallout? Were you super excited, maybe a little bit nervous, a bit of both?
Yeah, I think, you always have a bit of that nervous. I mean, the first reaction is always, "Oh my God, great, I got this job," and then it's, "Oh my God, great, I got this job." It's really exciting, and at the same time, it was completely scary because it's huge, and
right.
I guess I knew how big it would be, but it was way bigger than I even thought in the beginning. So many people and so many costumes and so many details that needed to be created. So it was a lot, but at the same time, so exciting. And when you get this chance, I mean, for me, it was sort of just eye-opening and groundbreaking in terms of having something really creative to do. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. I remember when hearing about the show coming to life, I was like, woof, that's going to be a job or whatever that is.
You're like, I feel bad for that costume.
Yeah, for sure. So the world of Fallout comes to an end at a time that feels quite similar to what we would consider the 50s, though it's not exactly. With that, I'm fascinated to hear about your research process as the series essentially jumps back and forth between this pre-war era and the post-apocalyptic world that we know as Fallout, essentially.
Yeah, so it was a lot about we dove into the pre Fallout existence, the pre sort of end of the world when it was. I think it was 2074, so it was retro futuristic 50s, where it was like the 50s had sort of come back, and how it's sort of cyclical in the world where styles come back. It was the 50s thing.
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that, actually.
Yeah, it was sort of like 50s again, and so or maybe in our story, it had never left. It was always sort of this optimistic world, and Dad, and but it had a Jetsons quality, so that there was a little bit of the futuristic elements, and keeping it just touches, so it wasn't supposed to look so futuristic that it was distracting. It's supposed to look different than the 50s as we know it now. So we kept little elements in there, the use of sort of resin and plastic and keeping things, using things that weren't available in the 50s that we created now. So we did like a Jetsons amp up, I would say. But then it was great because if you think about it, production stopped right when the bombs hit. And so there wasn't construction. So our whole rationale, and I think the rationale in the game in general, is that you can't get new things. There's no new style. Style is what you create from what you can scrounge and salvage. So it became a whole new level of style for the people that were left because they had to find things. And that was the cool challenge for me and my department, was just creating something out of the rubble, what comes out next, what comes from, soot, like what can grow. And that was the fun thing for me, is that we could create optimism through, people had their own style, because it was so many years after the bombs dropped. So it was, they turned a new page, and they had to create themselves and their identities from what was left. And, it was making things and all these found objects that we created, sort of wearable art pieces out of, like a strainer hat, and, things that you could, there was a shirt with forks all over it. And if someone found forks and that was what they could find, like, what did they do with that? And they found old, construction pants. Like, what would they do with what was left?
Yeah. That's so fascinating. And it's something I actually was going to ask you about too, because one of my favorite subtle details, and we'll get into the vault suit in a little bit, but when you see Lucy kind of on the surface and she has different pieces on top of her jumpsuit, which is something you do actually in the game, if you know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you and your team, then you were just talking about how people are making something out of nothing essentially on a surface, but like, what are you and your team then looking for when you're actually going to make some of these pieces? I mean, are you gathering forks? I'm trying to imagine what your workshop looks like, because you really do make something out of nothing.
Absolutely. And our workshop was a cross between like a salvage yard and like like there were different dye colors everywhere and paint and everything. It was like the most creative place ever. I loved it. Because it was taking things from one side of the room and transferring them and sort of upcycling them, if you will, into something else by the time they're at the other side of the room.
Right.
So my team was, working on, we would go and find things everywhere. So, I mean, I trash picked, I went to flea markets, we went to estate sales and vintage shops, anywhere, even like, some places that just sold scrap, just to picture something and make something. And then we all kind of spitballed about what it could become. And that was a lot of the research in the beginning. I was kind of playing with like, okay, if we had these found objects, what could this become, and what could be made from it? And that was so fun, just sort of seeing the transformation of things into something quite beautiful. It started out quite rusty and a mess.
Yeah, I have strong FOMO right now. I mean, I already missed out, but it's like a strong sense right now.
We'll send you a strainer hat.
Yeah, please. I'm going to be throwing my forks all over the kitchen after this interview. So obviously with a game like this, with such a huge fan base, there are likely going to be some expectations, as I'm sure you know by now. But as the costume designer, you still have to find that line between making it realistic. The actors still have to wear these costumes and be able to do these action scenes. So where do you find that balance between a realism, but then also paying tribute to the Fallout series so the fans are happy at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's, the structure and the bones of the show, we were always trying to keep very straight and, followed the rules of the game, like what was available in the world and what wasn't. And things that I think the fans would, we basically pictured that the fans would know every detail, and so we had to know every detail. Yeah. And so like, don't slip up.
It's so scary. I can't even imagine.
No, it was a lot. It was like a huge thing. But it was. I had a guy in my department that was an amazing gamer and a really huge Fallout fan. He's the one that told me about it coming to town in the first place. And he was sort of my consultant on if like, hey, can they use like this plastic? Like what's in the world? Like what can we use and what can't we use? And he would say like, duct tape's fine, plastic is not. Like he would make these sort of rules and statements that we could follow. That was great. It was like having your own consultant in there, like a Fallout consultant.
Wow.
But for me, I learned so much from what was in the game and what we had to follow, but then explode from there. So it was I really wanted to be respectful, and I hope that it came out that way of the game and what was already there, but just, sort of exploding it and making it. And that was the fun for me. It was making it into a world that was outside the game too, that people that were into the game could understand and respect and appreciate, I guess is the word. And making things into something that was a workable, that wouldn't give somebody tetanus or, that somebody could actually wear and do a stunt in and things like that. There were things that we had to omit because they were too dangerous.
I'm sure.
It was like, oh no, we actually can't pierce someone's lung. Like that would be bad. Because there was sort of no holds barred on the creative process. So it was like, let's create everything and do everything. But we still did the bolt suits within range of where it was. But we had to make it a 3D suit and make it sort of updated and functional and distressed and, realistic, but also something that somebody could wear for 12 hours a day.
Right. So that actually leads me to my next question. Let's talk about the vault a little bit and the vault jumpsuits, because it's such a iconic staple. Like you know it exactly. It's Fallout immediately with the colors and whatnot. What I also love about this suit, I've always thought this for years, that's so form fitting. I just can't it's tight and they all fit like a glove too.
Yes.
And you have so many different people in the vault too. So how did you and your team approach getting everyone their own vault suit? I mean, that fit, hopefully.
Well, what's funny is it could have been a real mess if we used the wrong fabric, because really there are some fabrics that are so superhero-y, and then I don't think that's a word, but
it's a word here. Yeah.
It's with the sort of shine and the spandex and the superhero look about it, which I was not interested in, because really they have to wear it more like a jumpsuit, a functional jump, one piece outfit. But we didn't want to see everything and do there was some personal things that had to be,
I got it. Yeah.
I mean, the fabric was absolutely perfect, because it was this 4-way stretch. I used it when I did After Earth and on some military costumes, and it's like this beautiful 4-way stretch woven fabric. It looks like a woven, and so it's matte. It doesn't have that sort of shiny, but it's made in Italy. It's made in small batches.
Wow.
It was insane to get as much as we needed for this, and I mean, it was the perfect fabric, but we had to get so much and keep dyeing it the right color, and so many steps to make it right. But it starts with the fabric. I mean, it absolutely had to be the right thing, or I mean, those suits would have been sort of ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. More ridiculous than they already are, actually, I would argue. And like you said, in the game, they're quite flat because it's a game. So how did you, what texture, and you mentioned that you made it feel a little bit more modern to the contemporary eye as well. What touches do you do to that suit to make it feel just, I guess, more realistic?
Well, there are parts of the suit in the game, and of course they've changed over the years also with the different iterations of the game.
Right.
And there were panels and different areas that were clear. It was sort of clearly on the game, they were rendered and beautiful, but you don't really know what they're made out of. So when we were making them, it was a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out what looked like an elevated version. What would make the arm. We tried so many different things, like printed fabric, 3D printed fabric, different applications on fabric. And what ended up working really well was pleated leather. Like that was, and a very specific leather because it had to be super thin. So we ended up making these pieces, my team, and it was just a lot of testing and see what would get there. But we ended up with such interesting pieces that came in, and it paid homage to the original, but still gave it its own life, which is what we wanted to do. And then it was a lot about getting it the right color because Bethesda has their blue.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it had to be right. But then we sort of updated the zipper area. So it was encased in the gold, but it was like a raw gold. So it looked like it was taken down and distressed. So it wasn't like this yellow down the front because that was sort of too jarring. And we had to try various, At first I worked with an illustrator and did a lot of new updates and what could we do. And then it was a lot about just figuring out what could make it, what could make the suit special.
Right.
Yeah.
That being said, and this question feels kind of silly now, but now that we've been talking, how much of this series is built versus sourced, I would say? I mean, I think the answer is pretty much everything feels pretty built at this point.
Yeah, everything's built. I mean, every single thing, I think, except maybe, even a lot of the 50s things we made. I mean,
wow.
I had a crack team, and I had an amazing tailor shop that, I don't know if you have watched up to Barb's character yet, but we had this sort of futuristic look on Barb that was very 50s oriented and just making all these individual things. And then we would source vintage items and just, we destroyed them because nothing was untouched. So if we didn't make them, we destroyed them, which was actually kind of sad. Like seeing things, it would be like this amazing dress, and you'd be like, take it downstairs to I don't want to see it anymore. Right. It has to be destroyed, So it was so those kind of things. A lot of vintage we found, but a ton of vintage we actually made. Especially if you look at the dress, the vintage wedding dress that she wears in the first one.
Yeah.
That she wears. We had 15 of them. We had to make them. So there was no thing in the world that we could have found. So we very much followed a vintage silhouette and then had to make so many of them because there's so many iterations where she gets bloody and stabbed and it was also supposed to be in the vault for a long time. It's a relic piece, that there's one of. Yeah.
It's like a family heirloom.
Yes. Heirloom. People wore and they all signed it. We all signed it in the costume department.
Oh, I love that.
And it was supposed to be handed down from various generation to generation and then sees the end of its run at that point. But
I could say, it might still be usable, but for the most part.
Yeah, that stuff comes off.
Yeah. Which actually brings me to one of my other favorite topics. One of my favorite aspects of costume design is actually the breakdown of costumes, which we're kind of just talking about. I love aging, dying, taking these costumes and making them feel lived in, dirty. And there's lots of dirt, blood, guts, everything in this show. So I have to imagine, I remember thinking years ago too, like whoever does this show is going to have probably the world's biggest breakdown department. At least I hope.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was crazy. When we started, we thought, okay, like I thought, what's really going to be important is an amazing textile department because it is all, but I thought that, but then of course the next day I was like, what's really going to be important is an amazing tailor shop. And then the next day, what's really going to be important is, every day there was a new, really important department to have. So the textile department was so important because really without them, you never would have felt the way it should have. It never would have made viewers feel like they were watching the game, because the game is so gritty, just like you're saying.
Right.
It was so important. My head textile artist, his name's Chandra Telford. She is this genius that did work on, Pirates of the Caribbean and all these sort of amazing things, that she just takes something and they're artists. They make something into something else completely.
Wow.
So just watching them work was kind of amazing. Like really watching them, like, for example, when I brought them down the Ghoul jacket that had been made in our tailor shop, in our shop, I brought it down, and we were spitballing about where it could go, and it was important that it has a shot in it, so it looks like maybe the Ghoul has taken it off a dead body that he shot, and we had to sort of figure out how he obtained the jacket in the first place, but then it also had to be so wrecked at the edges that you can believe that he's been wearing it for, maybe 150, 200 years. And the illustration that I had to show them was, it was just blowing in the wind. It was just this, like that.
It feels like it's disintegrating when you see it catch the wind.
Yes. And they created that. I mean, that's something that, and we had, I don't know, I want to say 10 of them. I might be wrong. More like 12, but we had so many, and they just got it to this place that is only an extreme artist can do.
That's incredible. I mean, shout out to that entire team, because it just totally is so immersive, and it's so important, especially for a series like this. So Amy, as expected, the world is absolutely in love with Walton Goggins as the Ghoul. Which, as someone who watches Righteous Gemstones, I was not shocked at all. So talk to me about designing this character, especially someone who we actually see, one of the only characters where we see their backstory as well. And I have to imagine there must have been some collaboration with Walton Goggins as well in creating this character.
Absolutely. And actually, we have a nice friendship now because of it. Because
good.
I love the guy. He like when an actor comes along that has so much experience and so much knowledge of the industry and just so much to give to the character, that we were feeding each other. Like, it was just, the first time we met in person, which, there were pictures and things like that exchanged first of just ideas, but then meeting in person, it was so inspirational for me to keep going on his character in the way that we both saw. It was like a meeting of the mind in such a great way that he brings this sort of cowboy quality anyway. Like, he's just the sort of original Marlboro Man, cool. Like, he's so cool, and he comes in with swagger, and so there was such a base for me to work with, It's not like I had to reinvent like a cowboy. He's already halfway there.
You just got to get the costume on there.
Yes. And it was so much fun to really there was a lot of fittings, and they were, it started with one thing, and then it was the new versions, and then bringing them down to a place where he felt like the Ghoul. And it was so great to see him turn into the Ghoul. Each fitting, it was like more and more becoming part of who he was. And his, input was so extremely valuable for me because he has so many great ideas. And so we were just talking, and he was like, but it was also like, he completely respected the art and what happens. He would put things on and just be like, yeah, you get this. Like, you understand where we're going here. And so it's like this sort of mutual respect that I loved working with that guy. And he is such a phenomenal actor, and watching him bring it to life was, even the camera test, I was like, whoa, like, just, we were playing with his Cooper looks during the camera test as well.
Yeah.
And, like, just messing with his handkerchief and moving it around and seeing the right way it should be. And he just like brings everything right to life. And it was so fun seeing that at the camera test, like seeing the character. I think it was cool for everyone to see him just like become that guy. Yeah.
Oh, it paid off. I mean, he's incredible in it, and I'm just so excited for him and everyone on this show. Let's talk about the Brotherhood of Steel, because I feel like this show would not work if the Brotherhood of Steel did not work, and it did. It totally paid off. But then also, to me, it feels so impossible seeing the power armor suits. I have zero idea how this came to be. I don't know how you did it. Please enlighten me, because it's crazy.
Well, the power armor was made. We had them all made. There was nothing CGI about the power armor.
Which is insane.
It's insane. And even when we started, we were like, "Oh my god!" Like it was a huge endeavor, because there was several iterations of the power suit, because one, had to be this massive thing that was probably, 1 million pounds, and then there was one that that the stuntman and Aaron had to walk in, and then there was one that had to, be able to use his arms, and so there was one that could sit down, and so there was several like big robots around, but not robots at all, but big metal suits that these amazing people in LA made and brought to us. And we were like getting the people, getting the stunt guy or Aaron in and out of them, which was hilarious. But it really the place that made them, hats off to them, because they were so great about keeping everything the way, because it was a real collaboration. The art department, the prop department, us, we all had a lot to say about what should be where, what things should look like. And they really took down the metal. We knew exactly what the metal was going to look like. They brought it to such a realistic place. And then we based a lot of things off that. So we worked really closely with them. And I think that, and with the props department, it was the first time in my sort of working experience, I guess, that I worked that closely with props, because we were just intermingled. Everything, was a collaboration. It was really great.
I could imagine.
Yeah.
Including the Pip-Boy too, I'm assuming, on their arms.
The Pip-Boy, it had to fit exactly on the suits that we made. So it had to, we were just constantly working with them on how these pieces were going to fit together, and what was that going to be like, and how could he draw his gun, and what was going to fit over his pants, and what worked, and how. So it was all just sort of like this rolling ball the whole time of ideas and cool things that were happening, and I think it was really beneficial for us that there was such a small amount of CGI and things like that. It was all practical, which at first we were like, oh God, blood and all.
What have I got myself into?
Oh my God, so much practical elements. But it ended up giving the actors so much more to work with, and so much more for us to work with in terms of seeing what was happening in the scene, and really, people really getting bloody and getting shot and things like that. It was cool.
I also think it's very important too, the practicality of it, because to really feel this world, I mean, post-apocalyptic has been done time and time again, but to really be in the suits, or just seeing the colors of Fallout, the blue and the gold, and just building these things from scratch, and seeing forks and stuff and the armor and whatnot, I think that's really helps the actors feel immersed in it, the cast, the crew, but then also the audience too. It just really all adds up and really helps make this world feel unique and special. So
and I think also with the post-apocalyptic thing, I think we never wanted the show to feel sad and post-apocalyptic in a sort of a typical it's the end of the world. It was supposed to be on the other side of that. So, it was the optimism of life going on.
Everyone there's really over it. The world already ended. They're ready for the next thing.
Everybody kept going. Water was low, but they learned to like deal with what they had left. And I think there's an optimism to the show that is really unique, and it's such a unique voice that we all listen to, and with Jonah being sort of the one really, his voice as a director is so unique, and that sort of sets it apart, I think, which I hope is that sort of like really unique voice.
Right. Oh, yeah. Amy, this has been such a privilege. I mean, the show has gone rave reviews. I'm obsessed with how much people love this show. I finished it last night. I stayed up. I was kind of like milking it because I knew I was going to interview you. So I didn't want to watch it all in one night. So I was like, okay, It's not till Friday. I could do one episode today.
I'm so glad you strung it out a bit, because it's so funny when you work on something for like a year and then people watch it and like
just like that. Yeah, space it out. So I wanted to ask you, just as a final question, what has the series meant to you, just personally and professionally, as a costume designer, but just someone who's had already such a successful career, but this just feels like something so unique and special?
And it totally was. I mean, on so many levels, it was unique and special. And I mean, you learn something new on everything, and your eyes are open to various things on every job. And really, if that stops, you should get out of the business, because it is like you have to see everything as an opportunity. But this job, I mean, it taught me, and every job I've had subsequently has reflected what I learned on Fallout, in that creativity is infinite. There's no wall if you can find the person who can do it, or find the place that can apply something, or find the skill involved, and if you have the idea, it can be made. And I think that was really sort of an exploding thing for my brain and career.
Right.
Like, I can do that. It's cool.
I love that. Amy, congratulations to you and your team. Such an incredible show, and I'm just so happy for you all. And I don't know, I'm excited to see what's next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The Art of Costume podcast is hosted and produced by Elizabeth Joy Glass and Spencer Williams. Our audio engineering and editing is done by Dan White. Follow us on TikTok at The Art of Costume and Instagram at The Art of Costume Pod. If you want to support the show, go to theartofcostume.com/podstore. For more podcast updates, costume reviews, deep dives, and interviews, go to theartofcostume.com. A blog dedicated to highlighting the best in costume design.